Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 1822. We will today continue with Warren Goldfarb's Wittgenstein on fixity of meaning. As I said last time, this is a rather condensed text, but it also has a marvelous feature of being a key into the especially investigations and remarks on the philosophy of psychology. So it's a tough nut to digest, but it brings an exclusive look into philosophical investigations. Last time we looked into how rationality has been hampered with, how it stops to be working when we are not clear about that thinking is a feature separable from the idea of it being words and inner speech or mental images. Because if we fall into that misconception, as Wittgenstein would call it, we will most likely also go into the idea that there are rules for thinking, that they can develop in a proper way according to essential rules, guidelines. These guidelines are very similar or have a shared family resemblance with generalities, universals, essence, and I think most definitely to be added to this series is original. Something often came up when we took Bauckham, for instance, and Köster. What is an origin? Is it more valid than anything else? With the fixation comes these ideas. And they make it difficult to be changed. You sort of become locked and fixed at the same time. And movement will in the end be impossible. you will be looking for rules no matter what. And this tendency often referred to going from single properties or particulars and going to the universals from that position. That will also happen by itself. You will become a Phrygian, if you like, or an Augustinian. And I would say once the mistake is made, you will end up inevitably in Platonic imagination. I cannot see a way out of that. Well, it will terminate there, no matter what. It is absolutely unavoidable. And therein lies the greatness of Wittgenstein, because he doesn't only criticize Plato or Frege or Hegel or anyone for that. He shows how it once upon a time in their thinking, how it started. It started with a mistaken picture. That's the starting point. So he finds the cause of the disease, if we're going to use metaphors from medicine, and he also delivers a cure. He's very particular in going to the very cause of it to make sure it will not come about. So his doing is very thoroughly. And the last interesting quotes we took was page 82, where there is a remarks on the foundations of mathematics, and he points particularly the reason for words are taken in the same way is not because they have some sort of inner meaning. Yeah, that's the quote. Inner meaning or hidden intention or an innerness that is like a black box, aka the beetle box. No, the reason for the uniformity of understanding of words is that we talk and act and that is already presupposed in everything that I am saying. Very important. So he gives an explanation for why words mean the same, have the same effect, do the same thing. It is not a Saussurean sine and sinefied relationship. It has to do that we act in a communal way. And that, of course, also implies if you go somewhere else, it could be severely different. I will now continue where I left off, page 83, names and descriptions. Wittgenstein's point can be elucidated by a close look at paragraph 79. Here, the particular focus has shifted from general terms to singular terms. But his easy segue into the section supports the view that the topic has been and continues to be fixity of meaning. On the surface, the section is a relatively straightforward attack on the theory of descriptions. Wittgenstein points out that when we use a proper name, there often is no one description that we would be willing to equate with the name. We may have in mind several descriptions, different ones may come up at different times, and so on. Indeed, Wittgenstein has sometimes been taken to be suggesting that proper names operate by means of a cluster of descriptions. It should be noted that a Russellian or a Phrygian, since for the purposes at hand the differences between Frege's analysis of proper names and Russell's is irrelevant. Can still think that in everyday language we do not assign fixed meanings to names. On those views, that is just to say that in everyday language we often speak ambiguously. Frege said, so long as the thing meant remains the same, such variations of sense may be tolerated, although they are to be avoided in the theoretical structure of demonstrative science. The theory of descriptions or of sense tells us how names can function at all, but there may may well be a slack in our ordinary uses. In how our utterances connect with the descriptions or senses that determine reference. The theories tell us how objects can be singled out at all and establish the standards for rational language use. They then give us the standpoint from which to describe failings of everyday language and to devise improvements. In particular, what a speaker consciously has in mind at the moment of uttering a proper name is not a decisive factor. These theories cannot be undercut simply by pointing out that speakers often do not have in mind any specific description or even any definite cluster of descriptions. To my eye, rather than offering a somewhat jejune criticism of Frege and Russell, Wittgenstein is operating at a deeper level. He is trying to examine what leads one at the very start to think that proper names have a fixed meaning, which determines what is named and endows assertions containing those names with content. To do this, he wants to elicit the plain facts that seem to point in the direction of these theories. What I mean by plain facts are practices we have regarding names and explanations, clarifications of names and justifications of assertions containing names when challenges to those assertions arise. These practices, Wittgenstein believes, are constructed so as to fuel a picture of how individuals are picked out by language. An important plain fact is this: if I am called upon to explain the use of a name in a particular case, I shall usually supply a description. It is, after all, the natural way, except in cases when ostension suffices, of answering the question, whom do you mean by X? Indeed, if an assertion I make using a name is challenged in certain ways, I may be required to provide a description. When certain matters of fact are put into question, then such an amplification is mandatory if I am to support my statement. Indeed, if I am to be deemed as knowing what I am talking about. That is how I am held to account for my assertion, for the provision of a description is what makes it clear what would count in the face of the challenge. As a justification for my assertion, in that sense, it is a precondition for the possibility of there being a justification for the assertion. Thus, if certain facts are in question, if the world is recalcitrant in various relevant respects, it seems that in order for me to have been staking myself to a claim in making that assertion, there has to be some description that clarifies what claim that was by elaborating what the name is contributing. Now, one can go on. The world might be recalcitrant in all sorts of ways. There's always the possibility that any fact may be in question. And then it seems inevitable to conclude that if I am staking myself to a definite claim in making an assertion containing a name, there has to be something that tells what the name is doing, no matter how the world is. That is, without taking for granted any facts. It has to be definite what, given any way the world is, would count for the assertion and what against it. Only thus could the question of justifying the assertion even make sense. This then requires a fixed content to the name, which picks out in a definitive and unconditioned way from all possible circumstances precisely those under which the name refers. In Frege's and Russell's hands, this becomes the requirement that one description be taken as definitional. I take it then that Wittgenstein is depicting a movement, or better, a slide from the plain fact that in particular circumstances, should certain relevant facts come into question, we are obligated to supply a description to the general demand that if we are to be genuinely accountable for our claims, a description has to be fixed so that no matter what the facts are, it is determinate what our claims require of the world. The commonplace, that we have to be responsible for our words in the face of challenges that actually arise becomes the demand that it has to be given in advance of any particularities or information which would tell us what the actual challenges might be. What counts as meeting any possible challenge? The picture is that language must operate no matter how the world is, in a vacuum of fact. It must be presuppositionless. Now, Wittgenstein is no stranger to this picture, for it is central to his early works. In the argument for simples of the Tractatus, he speaks of the eventuality that whether a proposition had sense would depend on whether another proposition were true, and concludes, in that case, we could not sketch out any picture of the world, true or false. In 4061, he says, it must not be overlooked that a proposition has a sense that is independent of the facts. The theme was sounded early in his notebooks when he says, the method of portrayal of the world by language must be completely determinate before we can compare reality with propositions at all to see whether they are true or false. Whether a proposition is true or false is something that has to appear. We must, however, know in advance how it will appear. In the investigations, Wittgenstein is trying to show how the picture of presuppositionlessness is constituted, and he is imputing to it a key role not just in his own earlier work, but also, less explicitly and presumably in more inchoate form, in the ways Frege and Russell frame the thinking about meaning. To undercut the demand for fixity of meaning, in paragraph 79, Wittgenstein's tactic is to examine more closely the crucial plain fact, the obligation we have to supply descriptions in the face of appropriate challenges or calls for clarification. He suggests that our practices are not as simple and uniform as the philosophical construction put on them. Indeed, the practices point in a direction away from that construction, not towards it. We do not simply supply a description to which we are subsequently committed. Our practices are far more variegated. Often, more than one description will be involved. And they may have different sorts of relations to each other and to the original name. In the face of a yet further challenge, we may revise the characterization of who is meant, and there are circumstances in we would be justified in that. There are circumstances too in which we would not be justified. Such a revision would be considered to be reneging on the original claim. We may start out with many descriptions, subsequently allowing some to be false, while maintaining our original claim. In other contexts, the claim would have to be abandoned rather sooner. What we do will differ in different circumstances. And mid-paragraph here, I feel apt to put the point actually, because the rest is a bit different. And we are in different circumstances. 1822. Here were a bundle of interesting outtakes. It's a very nice reference here to the Wittgenstein of before in the Tractatus. And of course, we have here a deep connectivity to the misapprehension of original. Here, in the terms of original pure meaning, if you like. But it will fit any originality, if you like. If we go to page 83, just to let you in on it, if you go to the second or third paragraph, it is actually names and descriptions. Proper names referring to something, just like my name Hans is referring to me. And that is the original Augustinian ostensive definition thinking. Maybe I turn up at a cocktail party and someone asks, where is this Hans who've been speaking so much about Derrida and Frege and Heidegger and whatnot? And somebody is giving me a name. I'm being a bit liberal with the verbiage, by pointing at me in a nice way, giving an ostensive definition. There he is. This there is very important, and this is also important. Those could be, did you hear me now? These, those also. There and this could be the only ones that are actually pointing out a thing, where there is no context. Although even that can be doubted, but for simplicity, there's only 4 terms that evades this simplification, or fits the simplification. Instead, we are usually thinking in the Phrygian or Russellian way, and especially the good old younger Wittgenstein, where names directly point to something without any need of context, intention, want, emotions, knowledge, and so forth. Look at page 84. The second sentence there. The theories tell us how object can be singled out at all and establish the standards for rational language use. A very condensed way of having the understanding of the interlocutor. And I continue without quoting really. They then give us the standpoint from which to describe failings of everyday language and to devise improvements. Socrates and of course Plato, who wrote what Socrates said and thought, meant that these things were very important. The lack of consciousness shows that consciousness is situated in the person. So when he's drunk or been hit by a rock in his head, there is no presence of a certain person's attention. The failings are usually used as proofs, and which, of course, this few sentences shows. It's important to sort of collect all the doubts to go into the model of that language is some sort of proper names that directly connects to something else by rules. The third paragraph, an important plain fact is this: if I'm called upon to explain the use of a name in a particular case, I shall usually supply a description. And that is true. But it comes afterwards, as we know. But there is a description, and we mistake that description for saying, this is how the word Hans is connected to Hans, or better, a computer connected to a computer. It is the description that comes first. It's the, see if I can pronounce it, the presuppositionness, the a priori. A computer is a mechanical electronical device that stores zeros and ones and so forth. This is the rules that identify the computer in a more complex way, but very close to the Augustinian pointing finger, the ostensive description or definition. And I've been bitten by a mosquito. How is that even possible? Nobody knows. If we go further down on the same page, if you please, Kalle. And the sentence beginning with and then it seems inevitable to conclude that if I am staking myself to a definite claim in making an assertion containing a name, there has to be something that tells what the name is doing, no matter how the world is. So it will work anyway. Doesn't need connections, doesn't need reflection, relations, any of those things. And it's going to be enforced here. Bear with me. We are coming to the problems later on, but page 85, last sentence on the second paragraph, if you may, Kalle. It's going to be the penultimate as well. The picture is that language must operate no matter how the world is in a vacuum of fact. It must be presuppositionless. Difficult word again. And I would add to that, in parenthesis, from my own point of view, it shouldn't contain observers, other thinking beings. Actually, this world of facts shouldn't contain a world. And then we promptly make a citation to the last paragraph on the very same page. And towards the end of it, often more than one description will be involved, and they may have different sorts of relations to each other and to the original name. So it's a bundle of descriptions, all of them explicit, to claim the original or to put the original in its proper place. And now I can see on page 86, and that's why I ended. The next lecture will be more looking into the problems with this, but here some rust, some problems, some preamble to the earthquake. We may start out with many descriptions, subsequently allowing some to be false while maintaining our original claim. In other contexts, the claim would have to be abandoned rather sooner. What we do will differ in different circumstances. Well, indeed, isn't that something that needs to be added? The difference in circumstances, the difference in reader, perceiver, experiencer, and what they have when it comes to presuppositions, the knowledge, the skill, the wisdom. But so far, we will halfway accept the Freudian view of the interlocutor. Kalle, please step in here.
Thank you. Let me repeat a little bit first. The picture is that language must operate no matter how the world is in a vacuum of fact. It must be presuppositionless. And then in Tractatus, then a proposition has a sense that is independent of the facts.
Yeah.
So this is, we could say, the wrong view that Wittgenstein later abandoned.
He found problems with it. to be a bit more subtle or försiktig. He found it to become problematic.
So how would we say it, how it should be instead? Now we could say that everything is intertwined. Language is entwined with the world. There's no vacuums. There are no vacuums of fact.
No, it's no clean, sterile laboratory.
Yes, and facts, and there are, but we have to be careful when we use the word facts, as if they were some kind of rules how the word is.
Yeah, indeed.
Facts are a little bit like presuppositions or assumptions that we make.
Yeah, he shows to how the presuppositions becomes necessitated once we start to think or make this oversimplification of the world. And all of a sudden we have all these rules. And I think the most fascinating thing, and this is what fascinated me once upon a time when I was heavily into the view of Tractatus. And of course, I developed that without reading Tractatus. We all have that view, I would say. Not to that extreme as Wittgenstein, but we all have that. And for me, I think the most marvelous thing was that the rules were just there. And we share them. So me, Jonas, and Helena, and Lotta, and who else? They all had the same rules for what made a word be that proper name. And this is the thing that Wittgenstein now is exposing. It is not that miraculous as I thought.
So here we are supposing that language or names are the so-called original, and the word comes later. The word is almost unnecessary.
It is unnecessary, Kalle. There's no need for a world.
Absolutely.
There's no need for me to get up in the morning to put my clothes on. There's no need for me, as I had to do this morning, to clean my bathroom. It took me half an hour. There's no need for me to pay my bills or to say hello to my friends in the corridor. There's no need for me to tie my shoes. It's fantastic. I live in a vacuum. It is tempting in some way once you get used to it, and I did, to be honest. You become used to not caring, so to speak. I think it's a moral stance as well, because it affected Wittgenstein. The early Wittgenstein was a terrible person in many ways. For instance, as a school teacher, traumatizing students and trying to learn them that facts are just out there in a no man's land. It's not something you want to learn from a teacher when you're 8 years old.
Absolutely.
I think the Austrian television made a program where they interviewed the poor pupils of Wittgenstein somewhere in the 70s. And like half of them were traumatized for life. But I think the more, the not as extreme variant that we ordinary people have is not that stark, but it's it does have those tendencies. We become cold, we become left hemisphere directed. We don't care that much. We still care, I think, but not that much.
Mm-hmm. Yes, today there is a lot of, since few years back, you hear it often. What are the facts?
Indeed. Very good. Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
any, this presupposes that we don't have any need of an observer.
No, 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 no. Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is already out there. We just need the facts. We need the facts to be settled or calculated by the chat GTB
Mm.
or an enormous computer ruled by the United Nations
Mm-hmm.
that decides all the laws in between the nations and make
Mm.
for world peace.
Mm-hmm. Many students who begin at the university have the supposition that here they will learn the facts,
Yeah,
objectivity.
yeah. Well, I did, to be honest.
Hmm.
That's I would say that one of the most the biggest reason I came to the life of academia. The truth would be there, and I could be a passive bookkeeper of it. And as time went by, I understood little by little, Kalle, that oh my God, I'm actually doing things myself. I cannot take myself out of the equation. It's a bit of shocking realization, actually. But it is an ethical change. It's an ethical change. And of course, Kalle, we spoke a lot. Oh, yeah, spoke earlier with Kalle about the thing when it comes to originals. They play a quite decisive role in biblical interpretation. Um, and the more science develops, the more accurate, so to speak, can our lookout for the originals be. We can decipher different texts and we can delve deeper and deeper into what we think is reality. And that will lead to more and more correct understanding, and the facts gets more and more refined. It is almost close to the famous cite from Lord Kelvin. Now we're just in need with another 1 or 2 decimals, and we reached the absolute truth. No more investigations, no more clarifications would be needed because we hit the very bedrock of understanding. We come to the outmost depth. Welcome back, Kalle. I continued a bit and I took the liberty to mentioning your area with the search for originals in biblical studies, and how with technology and expansion of archaeology and all those things, the search for the definite, absolute, exact original made by the very author by his own ink when his exact thoughts were present at that very moment. I think that would be the view of the Tractatus. Can you hear me, Kalle? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I come back here. I think something more you want to add?
Now I think we should stop there.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. This is, of course, on this side, we are mostly looking at the interlocutor's view, the Freudian, the Russellian view. But of course, we will go into the more positive side in the next lecture, or I think it would be 2 lectures before we get into that. Thank you very much, Kalle. Thank you very much for listening in. Have a very pleasant morning, day, afternoon, or evening. Bye bye for now.
Thank you.